Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Matt Mason with Imaginit Technologies. I'm the Director of Software Development here. And today I'll be sharing some of the challenges that we've had with application security in the Autodesk ecosystem in the past and how the new secure service accounts really are a big step towards solving these problems for the future.
And I'm Michael Beal, Principal Developer Advocate at Autodesk, and I'll be walking you through the technical part of this new Secure Service Accounts API. I'll explain why we created it and how you as a developer can get started. But first, let's walk through the agenda. We'll start by talking about what SSA is and why it matters, especially when you think about it from the pain points of the current OAuth models. Then Matt will share some of the OAuth background with OAuth types, the current IT admin approval process, and how 3LO automation is currently done today and how SSA helps solve that the right way. Then we'll cover the technical getting started walkthrough. We'll create a new robot account. We'll then provision it and generate some new access tokens using SSA. And then finally, Matt is going to wrap up with how Imaginit Clarity has begun the process of incorporating SSA into their application. So, what are service accounts? Or in particular, SSA. SSA stands for Secure Service Accounts. So think of it as a dedicated, non-human user account meant specifically for automation. It looks and behaves like a regular user in the system, like ACC in the members page, but it's purpose-built for automated workflows. So there's no more scripting of login mechanisms or refresh tokens or writing down that password on a piece of paper next to a server. This is a secure and scalable approach, and something we've been needing for a while.
And this concept of what we're doing here, it really resonated with our team because in the past, our customers would often create an application account so that it was clear what account was doing what kind of actions. But this required to sort of pretend that this was a regular human user, create an email address for them, and occasionally log in to go in and reset the credentials. And what's more, these were technically illegal by the Autodesk terms and conditions. And I've had arguments with Autodesk lawyers about Autodesk IDs needing to be limited to only natural born persons. Sort of absurd, and I'm happy to be rid of that. So to talk about the OAuth types, historically you had 2LO or two-legged OAuth, and that's really a very simple security model. You get the token, you can do a call, and you can do basically everything. You're running as the application itself. Whereas the three-legged OAuth is more complex. You go through a multi-step process with the user to get your token, and you can operate as that user, and you can refresh that token whenever you need. Now, for account-level authorization, you really before you can do anything in the Autodesk Construction Cloud or BIM 360 world, you really can do nothing until your app is approved by the ACC account admin for any account that you want to work with. And the account admin basically has to grant your app the rights to do almost everything. You really are just limited to the document management option or the account administration option, but you have access to everything when you're operating as a two-legged OAuth inside of an ACC account, that kind of environment. So you really have a lot of power. And making it more awkward, it's one thing when it's your own company. Like if you're developing your own application for your own company, you can just go in and check a box and fill it in, and you're up and running on your own account. Or even your customer's account. You're selling to one customer. But the nature of the AEC industry is that these Autodesk Construction Cloud projects live in lots of different people's ACC accounts, in an owner, in an architect, in a general contractor. And the reality is that you as the application developer, it's kind of awkward that you have access to every single project in that ACC account, even though your customer might only be a very limited participant in that account over there. So it's just a very jarring kind of thing. And I would say that for the past 8 years, I have had to have a call about once every 1 to 3 weeks with somebody's BIM coordinator, somebody's IT or CIO or CISO, to understand exactly what does it mean to approve access to our app onto their data. What can we do? What can our customers do with that data? And we've had to convince them that we were trustworthy because of the excess permissions that two-legged OAuth gave you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So let's step a little bit back in time, and let's look at why we even need 3LO access tokens. What's the big deal? And why is it so hard to automate things with 3LO endpoints? So if you've tried to access any of the ACC or BIM 360 APIs, you've probably discovered that you can't use 2LO access tokens everywhere. You most likely need to use 3LO access tokens. And to generate a 3LO access token, as Matt mentioned, you need a login box. In other words, you can't access any of these 17 plus Autodesk Construction Cloud APIs without a login box. No login box, no access. And so what do I mean by login box for the developer? Well, let's start with maybe an example. On the Getting Started page on the APS portal, we have an example called the Hubs browser. Now, this example, it's a classic example, and it allows you as a developer to put a login box on your custom web page. Your customers see your web page, they click on that login button, and then the Autodesk login box appears. Now, your customer then logs into the system, and with a 3LO handshake, you as the developer get a 3-legged access token. Now, an hour goes by, and what happens? That token expires, and that means you'll need to pop up a new login box. And that's going to make things really hard for automating things. Unless, of course, you know about the refresh token. So with a refresh token, you could use that refresh token and create a new access token before the access token expires. And we can do this forever. But wait, you'll still need a few things to make this multi-tenant. You're going to need to manage that session in a database, let's say Mongo database. And now you're going to need to manage that for all of the users in your system. So for every user session, you'll need to keep track of the expiry, and then you'll need to make sure you call the Autodesk Auth APIs to refresh the tokens appropriately. We call this maintaining a refresh token, and there's a great blog post on this. You present a login box, you write down that password, your customer writes down that password on a piece of paper next to a server. Maybe they type it in, or maybe they forget what the password is, and then they accidentally force the system to log out. And now you need to restart the login process again, or maybe the server goes down and you lose that refresh token session. And so as long as you keep your cycle refreshing those refresh tokens before the 14-day expiry, you can avoid that login box. But in the event that something goes wrong, you'll get that login box is going to pop up again. And that's what potentially makes this solution a little bit unreliable. And also, it's potentially got a password that needs to be written down on a piece of paper once every, say, 3 months. And then the last key thing is that activity log that the IT admin sees is going to be full of people that never seem to log out of the system. So also remember that when that login box does appear, and it maybe appears once every 3 months, someone's probably forgotten the password, and they'll probably be tempted to write down that password on a piece of paper next to a server somewhere. Or maybe they figured out a fancy way to automate the process with something like Puppeteer. They can break the captcha using some AI, and they can handle the one-time passwords with an Android emulator. Please don't do this. That's a bad idea. So that's one problem. It's complex. The second problem is two-legged user impersonation. So we have some API endpoints, not many, that allow you to impersonate a user using your two-legged access token. And that essentially starts putting users inside the system in the audit log in places where they probably didn't really log into. And that can be a little bit scary for IT admins managing sensitive project data. And it also makes the audit trail unpredictable. Now, another thing is to talk about this trust mechanism between the IT admin and the dev. Now, Matt touched upon this earlier when setting up an app permission with the IT. Think of this same mechanism as when you install an app on your iPhone or your Android device. You're going to the App Store and you're trusting the developer that created that app to run on your phone. And that's a very similar trust model that we have here. So think of it as 2 points of view. We'll look at it from the IT admin's point of view and then also from the developer's point of view. And so like any app on the ACC or BIM 360 App Store, the IT admin needs to trust the developer's app before installing it. But with 2LO access and the developer's ability to generate 2LO access tokens, that can create some trust problems. Let me break it down. Oh, actually, I'll let Matt break it down.
Well, I mean, I think it's just fair to say that, if you're a developer and you're using the two-legged OAuth, which is, kind of nice and easy, there's really no way to avoid getting more access than you should. Even with, the 2LO impersonation, it's not on all the APIs, and, and it's going to be on you to, for everything that you do to make sure that you're not overstepping the bounds of, of what a user, what your user should be able to do with your application. So it's actually, keeps me up at night that it's a little dangerous.
Right, and from the IT admin's point of view, I cannot tell what app is accessing what. There's no logs, there's no visibility for me. I have no way to restrict access to my sensitive projects, for example. And, that's a bit of a problem. I need to somehow restrict access to some of my sensitive projects. And I also need to audit what's going on in my activity logs. So with SSA, we help solve that problem. With every secure service account or robot account, it has a name and it has permission entities in your hub. So that means IT admins can grant project level access like they would for a regular user, a human user, and they get all of the security benefits of least privilege. So that means you get improved security. There's no login box. So that means no one's writing down passwords on a piece of paper. You've got better accountability. The secure service accounts appear in the activity logs. You've got IT admins have a familiar management system, and that helps them set up these secure service accounts just like they would any regular user. And then finally, there's compliance. SSAs are designed for these automated tasks. Let's go back to our diagram and look at how SSAs improve the process. Previously, our app could access all projects. Now let's compare that to how a human user uses the system. They have limited access. In this case, this person can only see projects A, D, and E. They have no admin privileges. Now imagine if we were to swap out that user and make them appear as a service account instead, a robot user. That service account has the same granularity, the same permission granularity as that regular human user. You can assign it to a single project, you can limit it to specific folders, and you can remove access as needed. The key difference compared to 2LO access is this robot has limited permissions, not the overall access to everything. They're limited to specific projects. They can only access, in this case, projects B, C, F, G, H, and I, and K. If I've got that right, yep. So SSA means that IT can limit what projects a developer app can access. So what does a robot account look like in the system itself?
Yeah, I mean, so a robot account, or an SSA account, if you were, um, it's basically just an email address at the heart of it, and it looks something like this. And when you first look at it, it looks like a lot, but it really breaks down into something that's fairly basic. You request a user ID. And you can set up a first name and a last name for this Autodesk account. And the second half of the email basically has your app's client ID in it. And, so it's not just a mess of characters. It is a long email, but it's not just a mess. This has the benefit of proving that this account is tied to your application as a developer. And this account can only be used by your application as the developer. It can't be used in any other way. So it's great. And you've got the email address. It works just like a regular human user. You add it to projects in ACC, you add it for folder permissions, any of the ways that you would typically control permission and access and that kind of thing. It's generally being covered by SSA.
Great, thanks Matt. So now let's get a little bit technical. I'm going to cover the API docs, provide a little bit of a walkthrough and getting started guide, and show you a sample management application to speed up your development time. But first, we announced the beta release of Secure Service Accounts on March 25th. You may have seen the blog post here. It's the one with the cute little 2 robots on it. Now this blog post, it gives you a great little overview of what SSA is, just like this presentation. And it talks about the benefits and some of the current limitations. And it also explains where to find the documentation. So you can find the Secure Service Account docs published on our docs portal as of today. And the way to find it is you search for Secure Service Accounts. From there, the docs, you can see things like the naming conventions. You can also see the REST APIs under the reference guide. And then also the 3 steps to getting started. And I'm going to cover those now. The 3 steps, they're pretty straightforward. You're going to start by creating a robot account. This is going to give you a private key. You're then going to configure that robot inside your ACC hubs. That's the provisioning step, step 2. And then the last one is, now that you've got your private key, you're going to exchange that for an access token. So let's switch over to the docs portal and take a look at what that looks like. So here we have the APS webpage. Oops, APS webpage here. To find the documentation, you click on Documents, API and SDKs, and then search for the word Secure Service Accounts. And this will take you to the main docs portal page. Here you can see there is an overview And in particular, down the bottom under Reference Guide, you can find the API docs. Here's all the REST points. The two key ones you need to know about are the first one, the post creating a service account, and then the last one, exchanging a JWT assert for a token. And we're going to cover those in the how-to guide here. Another thing to take note of is right now we're in a beta, and so there are still some known limitations that we're working through. And then last but not least, is the naming conventions. When you create your service account, you'll provide a first name and a last name and a name. And that's important to name this something meaningful so that IT administrators who are going to see your service account, they can see it inside the hub system as a service account name. And so we provide some recommendations on how to name that. All right, so let's get started with walking through SSA. As I mentioned before, there are 3 steps. We'll create a service account, we'll provision it, and then we'll generate a token. Now you can do that through these REST calls here. You can follow these steps here. Here's a curl command for the first 3 steps. Then we'll talk about provisioning. And then the last part is exchanging that private key with an 3-legged access token using these curl commands. But to speed things up, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to show you the Python sample code for creating the service account here. And I'm also going to walk you through a sample project called the SSA management tool. Now this is a sample project you can find on GitHub here. And it was written by one of our colleagues on the DAS team, Adam. You can run this by typing in ssa-manage.autodesk.io as a quick sample. And what I'm going to do now is just go through that first step. Of creating that account. Before I do anything though, I need to make sure I have a client ID and client secret. So go to the APS developer portal, click on the sign in if you haven't logged in already, and then go ahead and under the applications page, create a new application, and specifically make sure you check the server to server app. Once you create the account, you'll get a client ID and client secret. We're going to use that client ID and secret both in the Python sample code, which I'm going to show you in a second, and also in this management console. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my client key and secret here, and I'm going to click on the login button to get me started. Now I can create a robot account really quickly by providing a name like service, and I'm going to call this robot 2 and create that account. When I click on this button, it's going to call 2 APIs. Oops, the name is already there, so we're going to call this robot 3. Here we go. And that's just created this new robot account here. So when I click on that button, it's actually calling 2 curl requests. And those 2 curl requests look something like, like this. I'm just looking at the Python code. So we'll first call the first curl request, which is to get an admin token. In the getting the admin token, we're going to need 3 particular scopes. So we'll create a new 2-legged access token with these 3 scopes: service account read, write, and account key write. We'll use basic auth, and then we'll call the post request with the grant type of client credentials. With that, we'll get an admin access token. Once we've got the admin access token, we'll call a second post request to create the service account. And this is going to give us that email address. So here we are calling /service accounts with our admin token as the bearer, and we're going to provide that first name and last name that I mentioned. Once we call that, we'll end up getting back this JSON response. The JSON response provides back the service account ID and an email address. Here you can see it's service account robot3 with the client ID, which you can see here, and the post amble Autodesk ADSK service account.com. You'll need this email address for provisioning later. All right, the next part is to create a key. So I'm going to click this Create Key button, and that's going to create a service key, and it's also going to save a private key. So if I look at my sample code again, here I'm calling, I've got my email and my service account. The next part is I'm creating this service account key here. I call this endpoint service accounts with my service account to the keys using my admin token, and that's now going to return back the key ID and the private key. So let's click on that and see what that looks like. Here it is. Here's the key ID and here's the actual private key. I'll need to save this in a private, a secure place so I can generate access tokens later. This is the key part, the most important part of secure service accounts. We're going to use this private key later to generate three-legged access tokens as long as we need them, whenever we need them. All right. So now that we've got and generated our robot, now we need to provision it. We need to set it up in the system. Now you would set up your robot account and your app like you would a regular client ID. So you go to ACC or BIM 360 under the admin console, and you need to add your client ID, which is this one, and you need to add it as a custom integration into your app. That's something that Matt mentioned in the first few slides. And then finally, you're going to take that email address from here, and you're going to add this email address as a member of your hub. So go to the members page, either the account admin or the project admin, and add that secure service account email as a new member. Now, if you decide to allow that member to be an admin, there's no further changes. But if you want to do further restrictions and restrict the secure service account to fine-grained folder level permissions or file level permissions, then you'll need to add some additional provisioning, just like you would a regular user. So in this case, you'll subscribe to the docs portal, and then you'll assign project and folder permissions at the docs level. So here you can see I've got the ACC docs files. I can right-click on the folder permissions, and then I can add the user by clicking Add and specifying that robot email address. Let me give you a quick walkthrough of what that looks like. So here I have my docs folder, project files and folders, and I've got this folder here called Puro CIE. I click on the permission settings, and I can see my robot service account is already added. And I'm going to use a test account to see what that looks like. This is a sample application I wrote earlier. And here I can see all of the hubs and folder permissions that this particular account has access to. In particular, I can see that it has access to the Puro CIE folder, and I can see my file, which matches ACC. Now what I'm going to do is remove this user from the system. So I remove the user as I would a regular user. And now when I go back to my sample application, I can see that folder is now being removed. And I can simply add that back as well. So same thing as before. I click on Add. I can add my robot test account. And I can specify permissions, in this case view only. And I can add that robot back, and here it is here. Now when I go back to my sample application, I can check the permissions, and I can see the folders being added back. Great, so that's the provisioning setup. Now the last part is, how do I generate an access token? So I mentioned before that I have this private key. Now I'm going to call one more curl, I'm going to make one more curl request and exchange this private key with an access token. And when I do that, I want to specify what scopes and what permissions this access token can have. So in this case, I really just want data read and maybe data write. And then I'll click on this button here, and that's going to use this private key and exchange it for an access token. And you can see that here in this diagram. I'll create and sign a JWT and then call that curl endpoint and exchange it for a three-legged access token. In the About walkthrough, you can see sample code in 3 different languages to achieve this. Here's the Python code. There's also a JavaScript example and a C# example. Let's quickly walk through the Python example. Here I'm just going to call generate JWT assert, and that's going to take all of this hard-coded config information, my client key, secret, the account ID, the key ID, and finally the private key. I'll encode all of that information in this JWT, just like this one, making sure I've got the expiry and also the scope. That will create a JWT string, and from there, once I've generated that string, I'll now exchange that with a post request, a curl request, to the Autodesk APS auth endpoint, to this endpoint here. So I'll send a post request with my JWT string assertion, and that will return back my access token, as we can see here. Now, just to validate that this access token is in fact a three-legged access token, let's open it up in JWT.io to decode it. Here I've clicked on JWT.io. Here's my access token, my three-legged access token, and I can see that it's got my application client ID for verification, as well as that user ID here. So I know that this is in fact a three-legged access token. I can also identify that this is a service account by looking at the JTI. The JTI shows that SA- specifying secure a service account is specified here. So you know if anyone sends you, or you're debugging and you see a three-legged access token, you can identify that it is a secure service account access token by the JTI. Okay, so that covers the 3 steps of generating a robot, provisioning it, and generating a three-legged access token. I've also covered the sample code, the secure service management tool, where you can speed your development up. And finally, let's switch back over to slides, which is, no, wrong one. Oop. There we go. All right, and that's the demo. Matt, you've been working with secure service accounts with your company and with Clarity application for some time now. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. We were early adopters of secure service accounts because we feel strongly about it and have for a long time. We've already launched our Clarity 2026 product with full support for service accounts, basically just in parallel with what we are already doing. You can choose to start using a service account, and it's also in the process of being deployed into our Imaginit Pulse product and some of the other products that we have. So we're fully committed to it, and our products do a lot of automation kind of thing that really that are best done in kind of a server to server kind of way. But we've traditionally used three-legged OAuth and that refreshing token approach to deal with the security issues. But now with secure service accounts, we have sort of the ease of and the consistency of two-legged OAuth, but really with the accountability and the management that we've gotten from three-legged OAuth in the past. If and when Autodesk can offer the option to disable two-legged OAuth, then we're really going to have sort of less operational risk associated with being added as an app to an account. So we're looking forward to that. Other sort of pros and cons, in general, an SSA is more secure because the password can't be stolen. It can't be used interactively. There's no way to actually, there is no password to log in with to the, to Autodesk Construction Cloud. So it can only be used by our app. It can only be used by API. And so that really limits like the potential misuse of it. And then, obviously permissions assigned by an ACC admin, just like regular human users. So there's nothing else that people have to learn. And I also like the fact that if something falls into disuse, if an ACC account is not, or I'm sorry, if an SSA account is not used for 1 year, it will become automatically disabled. So no sort of leftover accounts hanging around with meaningful permissions out there that you forgot about. So I think that's great. In terms of the cons, the only real, I would say, con in the SSA side of things is that we traditionally, because we used three-legged OAuth for our side of things, and because our app sort of predates the dedicated server-to-server accounts within, or app setup within within APS. Our account was set up as a traditional web, application that allows three-legged OAuth. Unfortunately, with SSA, you cannot use SSA with apps that are set up that way. You can only use them if they were set up from the beginning as a server-to-server kind of app. So it's better, if it's a no-brainer if you are moving over from a server-to-server app where you've used two-legged OAuth historically to move over and start using three-legged. But for our case, we basically had to create a separate client ID to support SSA. For people who are interested in using it, any existing account admins or existing accounts that we were already approved on, we had to get them to reapprove with the new client ID and the new app. We had to go to the App Store and get another app in the App Store, which is a little strange. And ultimately, people have to reassign your new SSA robot user to the same things that that you might have been using a sort of fake service account in the past. So there's some work in order to make everything happy with SSA, but ultimately we believe that it's worth the effort. I think the other things that are worth mentioning, some of our thoughts on implementation. So ultimately, the SSA, we are taking the approach of every customer of ours gets, would sign up for their own SSA. And so it's sort of a customer-specific application account. And so they would tend to, as Michael said, use something that points out their firm name, so that when they ask for permission from their partners and their partners hubs, that it's clear what is this account that we're being asked to add to a project or that kind of thing. So picking a reasonable name is important. Also, we are an on-prem solution mostly with Clarity, but this private key concept, when you are storing it, I do want to sort of remind people to, this is a key that opens many doors, and just to make sure that you're storing it appropriately, securely, however you are storing it. And if you're like us and on-prem and you're sort of transmitting it around a little bit, to make sure that it's secure in transport or in transmission. Beyond that, this is also a good opportunity to implement a kind of key rotation scheme. So the APIs are available for that with SSA. And so just because we were setting it up from scratch. We used it as an opportunity to not just set up SSA and private keys, but also have a built-in key rotation scheme from the beginning. So in general, I mean, for us, SSA made it easy to sort of balance development ease and security. And we feel like in a server-to-server kind of situation for automation, this is the right way to do it going forward.
Yep, and for IT teams with secure service accounts, you don't have to grant global access anymore. You can restrict access to those sensitive projects. You can restrict access to those sensitive projects, and you can also track the usage via the standard activity logs. So it fits in seamlessly with your existing workflows. For developers, we are still in beta, so your feedback is very much welcome, and please reach out to us via this email address and provide us feedback while we're still in this beta stage. Thanks everyone, and have a great DevCon.